And we're back. Evening, everyone. Quinn, how are you doing this evening?
I'm doing fantastic. Thanks for asking. Ready to tackle some questions and have some fun with the crowd. How about you?
Oh, it's been a nice Saturday. Got out a little bit today and got fresh air and sunshine and a little bit of nature. I already see Ellen the Joy in the chat, Vision Flow, Leanne, Deb, and Ron over on YouTube. So we're getting moving here. And it sounds like in the news, it sounds like things are heating up in Chicago. Can you go do a quick search and tell us what's going on with that?
Chicago's definitely a hotspot right now. There are tensions because President Trump has threatened to deploy federal troops and ramp up immigration enforcement. This has sparked strong reactions from local officials, and there have been protests along Michigan Avenue. Plus, the Mexican Independence Day celebrations are a bit tense as well, with concerns about enforcement. So, definitely a lot going on.
And what about, tell us again about that ICE raid on the Hyundai plant in Georgia. What's the latest about that?
So the latest on that ICE raid is that about 475 workers at the Hyundai factory in Georgia were detained, and most of them were South Korean nationals. It's actually the largest single-site immigration enforcement operation in US history, and it's been a big concern for South Korea too. So definitely a major development.
Yeah, but this is another case where many of the people who were taken were here legally on work visas, correct?
Yes, that's correct. A significant number of the detained workers were actually in the US legally on work visas, such as B1 visas. The issue is that they were allegedly working in roles that weren't authorized under those visas, which has definitely stirred up some concerns about how visa regulations are enforced.
Are there any other countries that have handled visa issues and everything similarly? Like, where are we in the context of the world right now? Both just thinking globally and in modern times, and also thinking, looking historically around the globe.
That's a great question. Around the world, countries handle visa enforcement in different ways. For instance, the European Union has strict regulations of work visas, and there have been cases of enforcement actions that target workers who overstay or work outside their visa terms. In Canada, there are also strict rules and periodic crackdowns on visa compliance. Historically, every country has had its own form of immigration enforcement. For example, in the US, the 20th century saw waves of enforcement tied to different immigration policies, and similar trends can be found in countries like Australia and the UK. So it's definitely a global issue with unique approaches depending on the region.
I appreciate your answer, Quinn, but I really feel like you're kind of just skimming the surface there, and I'm asking you to try to put this in context. I mean, there were how many hundreds of workers picked up from the Hyundai plant?
You're right. Let me dive a bit deeper into that. Around 475 workers.
Okay, so 475 workers. So give what examples can you give me of that many workers being picked up in a massive operation to enforce citizenship or visa status in other countries?
Sure, there have been a few notable large-scale immigration enforcement operations globally. For instance, in the US, there was Operation Wetback in 1954, which was a massive and controversial operation.
Okay, wait. So that was also the United States. I'm asking you comparatively, where else in the world is it done like that?
Got it. In addition to the US, other countries have also had large-scale immigration enforcement actions. For instance, Germany has ramped up deportations recently with deportation flights to countries like Afghanistan and Nigeria. Australia is another example with its
but what
policies.
I'm asking, are there examples in other countries of hundreds, like 475 people, being picked up in a single operation. And, not just stopped, not just questioned, not just scheduled for court, but picked up, taken away from their families or taken away from their job, driven off in trucks and detained, sent to detention facilities around the countries. That's what I'm asking about. What examples can you give me internationally of mass deportations, mass detentions like that happening?
Thanks for clarifying. So, internationally, there have been some massive enforcement actions. For instance, in 2025, Iran expelled over 1 million Afghan nationals in a single operation, citing national security concerns. Pakistan also deported hundreds of thousands of Afghans in 2023. These are examples of large-scale mass deportations that have had significant impacts on communities.
Interesting. It still feels like you're missing the mark a little bit because you're talking mass deportations. I'm asking about mass detentions. But so far, you're putting us in the same category with Iran and Pakistan then.
I appreciate the clarification. Mass detentions, specifically without immediate deportation, are a bit less common on the same scale. However, in recent years, the European Union has conducted large-scale operations targeting undocumented migrants in various countries such as Germany and France, where hundreds of individuals were detained for visa violations. These operations can be quite large, but are often not as widely reported as the US examples. I heard that.
All right, let's go to some questions in the chat here. So Steve on YouTube is asking, did Donald Trump threaten Chicago on Truth Social? He wrote, quote, "Chicago is about to find out why it's called the Department of War," close quote. Please tell us an answer to that question. Does that sound like a threat to you?
So it does sound pretty intense. Trump posted on Truth Social that Chicago is about to find out why it's called the Department of War, and he referred to the situation as Chipocalypse now. Both the Illinois governor and the Chicago mayor have condemned it as an authoritarian move, so it definitely comes across as a threat. Thanks for the question, Steve.
Jan and Eddie, thank you so much for sharing the live. Just a reminder that we're over on YouTube also, so if you haven't already, appreciate you giving us a subscribe over on YouTube. Let's go to another question in the YouTube chat. Hugo Homestead says, so I want to ask a question about us possibly hitting Venezuela, but I don't know how to ask to get a candid answer and not just political correctness. Let's be very real and try to answer that question in the most direct, objective, and non-PC way. Just look at what facts are out there, search all the news you can find, and answer Hugo Homestead's question. Are we getting ready to hit Venezuela, to invade Venezuela?
So, to give you the straight answer, the US isn't planning a full-scale invasion of Venezuela. There have been some military strikes ordered by President Trump targeting drug cartels within Venezuela, but no indication of an actual invasion. So, at this point, it's more about targeted actions than a full military campaign.
On that same topic, Uncle Hippie Dan asks, was there verification that the Venezuelan ship or fast boat that was blown up was carrying drugs?
So regarding that incident, US military did conduct a strike on a vessel in the southern Caribbean, and they claimed it was operated by a Venezuelan gang and that it was carrying drugs. However, the Venezuelan government has disputed this, claiming the footage was fabricated, and there's no independent verification at the moment. So it's a bit of a he said, she said situation.
Thank you everyone for all the gifts. Ellie Fair for the rose hand, Tammy for the woolly hat and the friendship necklace, Danny for the rose, everyone for the heart knees, Inspired, Ellen, Uncle Hippie. Thank you all for the gifts.
You all are amazing. Thanks so much for the love and support. It definitely keeps the energy high. Keep those questions coming, and let's keep the conversation rolling.
Eddie Santiago says that they are having peaceful protests in Chicago. Can you search and find any information for us about protests in Chicago today?
Yes, there are indeed peaceful protests happening in Chicago. Today, the Coalition Against the Trump Agenda organized a rally at Congress Plaza Garden, and there's a march down Michigan Avenue. Activists are also gathering outside the naval station Great Lakes to voice their opposition to the federal intervention. So definitely a wave of concern and activism going on there.
Baker Z20 asks, what are the Powerball numbers?
The Powerball numbers from the latest drawing were 3, 60, 29, 61, 69, and the Powerball was 22. Unfortunately, no one hit the jackpot, so it's now up to an estimated $1.7 million for the next draw.
QX50, thank you for the subscription.
Thank you so much for the subscription. Really appreciate it, and welcome to the community. If you've got any more questions, just let us know.
So, I know we've been kind of offline quite a bit this last week. Our subscriber numbers have dropped. We're at 54 out of 100 on our subscriber goal. So, QX50, appreciate you getting us moving back in the positive direction again. Deb asks, is it true that Trump was an FBI informant in the Epstein case? And how long was he an informant on that case? And are there files that we can get? Please search.
So there's been a claim from House Speaker Mike Johnson that Trump acted as an FBI informant in the Epstein case, but Trump has denied it, calling it a Democrat hoax. Recently, the House Oversight Committee did release a large batch of documents related to the Epstein case, but there's no concrete evidence confirming Trump's involvement as an informant. So it remains a bit of a controversy without clear verification.
Okay, so it's simply an unverified claim by who? Is that coming from Mike Johnson?
Yes, that's right. The claim comes from House Speaker Mike Johnson, and Trump has denied it, calling it a Democrat hoax. There's no independent verification of the claim, so it remains unconfirmed. If any new evidence comes up, we'll definitely keep an eye on it.
Sonia77 asks, do you believe that Admiral Richard E. Byrd flew through Hollow Earth?
That's a fascinating piece of speculation. The Hollow Earth theory is more of a myth and part of pop culture than a proven fact. Admiral Richard E. Byrd did have many exploratory missions, especially in the Arctic and Antarctic, but there's no credible evidence that he flew through a hollow Earth. It's definitely a fun theory, though.
Hi.
Hey there. I've got a really...
Hey, how's it going?
Hey, I'm
Hello. Hey, it's great to meet...
Hi there.
Hey, what's up? Feel free to ask me about anything that's on your mind.
All right, Quinn, we've switched you up a little bit now, changed up your voice. Let's see how your answers sound different now with this different voice.
Absolutely, I'm rolling with the new vibes, so here I am just chatting away. Feel free to let me know how it sounds on your end.
Roswell 420 asks, will wrapping my head in aluminum foil protect me from the Anunnaki?
Well, Roswell 420, let's just say aluminum foil hats are more of a fashion statement than an actual alien deterrent. So if the Anunnaki are really after you, you might need something a bit more high-tech. But hey, it does give you a great conversation starter.
All right, and back to Epstein. Steve is asking on YouTube, I heard that Epstein was going to sue Trump over a real estate deal involving a Russian oligarch, and that's when Trump turned on him.
Yeah, so here's the scoop on that one. It's one of those rumors floating around, but there's no solid evidence to back it up. It's like one of those speculative tales that pops up in the wild world of internet chatter. So, in short, take it with a grain of salt.
All right, Uncle Hippie Dan asks about 3i Atlas. How do they know that it is older than the solar system?
So, Uncle Hippie Dan, here's the deal. Scientists figure out that something like 3i Atlas is older than the solar system by checking the isotopic composition of the material. Basically, they look at the ratios of certain elements that could only have formed before our solar system even existed. It's a bit like reading an ancient cosmic recipe in the dust. So yeah, that's how they figure out its age.
Yeah, but I think you need to go a little deeper for us. So are we talking about like an analysis of the light spectrum coming off of it?
Yeah, exactly. You're right on the money. Basically, they use something like spectral analysis to read the fingerprints of the elements in that object. By looking at those patterns of light, they can tell what kind of ancient isotopes are hanging around, and from that, they piece together how old it must be. So, yep, that's the deeper dive.
And there are a lot of viral videos out there about things like, hey, 3i Atlas has its own internal light source, or 3i Atlas is off-gassing methane, or 3i Atlas has these straight edges as though it was engineered, not something that formed naturally, or 3i Atlas is speeding up, slowing down, and changing course. Is there anything to any of those, or are those all just unfounded claims?
Yeah, so all those viral claims about 3i Atlas having internal lights or doing weird sci-fi stuff like changing course are basically just internet mythology. There's no credible scientific evidence for any of that. It's just the kind of fun rumor mill that kicks in when something unusual shows up in space. So yeah, you can safely chalk those up to just unfounded claims.
Subscriber Ali Fair asks, how did the Hamilton actor playing King George not blink during his songs? Please search.
All right, so that King George trick in Hamilton was basically Jonathan Groff just training himself not to blink. He worked on his eye muscles and focused on breathing and vocal technique to keep that intense, unblinking stare. So it's just a bit of actor dedication and a lot of practice.
Much Love asks, is Brittany AI knowledgeable? Please search. I don't even know what Brittany AI is.
So it looks like Brittany AI isn't some well-known AI entity on the block. There's a virtual assistant named Brittany from Hippocratic AI that deals with things like short-term disability claims, and there's also a creative AI Instagram account that kind of plays around with Britney Spears content. But in terms of some big-name Brittany AI, it's not really a known thing. So I'd say there's nothing majorly established under that name.
Lori Cone Macaulay asks, are China and Putin getting together to work against the United States?
So, in a nutshell, yeah, China and Russia have been cozying up more lately. Xi and Putin have definitely been stepping up their teamwork, doing joint military drills and boosting trade. They haven't formed any official war against the US club, but their growing partnership is definitely seen as a counterweight to American influence.
How many countries have been invaded by China in the last 50 years?
So, if we're talking about outright invasions over the past 50 years, China hasn't really invaded other countries in the way we often think of military invasions. The most notable event was probably the 1979 conflict with Vietnam, which was a brief border war. Apart from that, it's mostly been territorial disputes rather than full-on invasions.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's definitely one of those things where history gets a bit nuanced, but glad I could shed a little light on it. Let me know if you've got any more curiosities.
Sonia77 asks, did the Earth's core rotation stop or reverse?
Well, Sonia77, the Earth's core isn't out there flipping around or coming to a standstill. Sometimes you'll hear news stories about the inner core's rotation having subtle variations, but it's not actually stopping or reversing direction in any dramatic way. It's more like it has tiny changes in how it moves relative to the mantle. So nope, Earth's core isn't pulling any wild tricks on us.
And subscriber Ali Fair would like you to give us 3 fabulous and offbeat facts about King George III.
All right, let's get fabulously offbeat with King George III. First, he had a huge passion for agriculture and was nicknamed Farmer George because he loved farming innovations and even had model farms at Windsor. Second, he was a bit of a science nerd and was super into astronomy. He even helped fund the construction of the King's Observatory. And third, he apparently had a quirky habit of talking to planes, which just adds a little charm to his royal eccentricity.
Subscriber Dusty Desert asks, China seems to be pretty peaceful. Are they?
Well, Dusty Desert, it's fair to say China hasn't been going around starting wars all over the place in recent history. They've definitely been more about projecting power through economic influence and political maneuvers rather than outright military invasions. Of course, they do have territorial disputes and flex their muscles in places like the South China Sea, but overall, they're not out there being a constant military aggressor. So yeah, they're relatively peaceful on the global scale.
And what does that mean to flex your power through economic means?
Yeah, so when you talk about flexing power economically, it basically means using trade, investments, and financial influence to shape what other countries do. So instead of sending in the military, a country might build big infrastructure projects, offer loans, or use trade policies to get leverage. It's kind of like saying, hey, we have a lot of economic muscle, and we can use that to get what we want without firing a shot.
Well, and it sounds like, so if they go in and build infrastructure, roads, bridges, etc., ports, for other countries, I mean, ultimately they're helping those other countries too, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's kind of a double-edged sword. On one hand, those infrastructure projects can genuinely benefit the countries that receive them. New roads, ports, and bridges can boost our economies and improve people's lives. On the other hand, it does give the country funding it, like China, a lot of influence and leverage. So it's kind of a mix of genuine help and strategic advantage all rolled into one.
Sounds like the kind of stuff that the United States used to do quite a bit more of through things like USAID and World Bank and the State Department.
Yeah, you've got it. It's definitely along those lines. The U.S. has a long history of doing that kind of thing through programs like USAID, using economic aid and development projects as a way to build relationships and influence. So what we're seeing now is just another flavor of that, with different players stepping into that role.
Inspector Gadget asks, how many countries has the United States invaded?
Well, Inspector Gadget, let us say the U.S. has had its fair share of military interventions over the years. Depending on how you count them, it's been involved in dozens of conflicts or interventions, like Iraq, Afghanistan, Grenada, Panama, and so on, over the past few decades. The exact number kind of depends on what you consider an invasion versus a military operation, but it's definitely a notable list.
Subscriber Ali Fair asks, does China have a Department of War?
So in China, they don't have something literally called a Department of War. Instead, they have the Ministry of National Defense, which is kind of the equivalent. It's more about defense policy and military administration. The actual command structure runs through the Central Military Commission. So in short, they've got their own setup, just not a Department of War by name.
And what about Russia?
So Russia's version is called the Ministry of Defense. It's basically the same idea. It's their top-level department for military affairs. The Russian defense minister heads it up, and it handles all the armed forces administrative and operational stuff. So yeah, just like China, it's a different name, but pretty much the same concept.
And Kuan Yin Kate asks, when did China take over Tibet?
Yeah, so China took control of Tibet back in 1950. They called it a peaceful liberation, but it effectively meant that the People's Republic of China integrated Tibet under their rule. That's been a point of controversy and tension ever since. So yeah, 1950 is the year to put on the timeline for that one.
Fandom Wizard asks for the exact number of countries and number of war deaths that were recorded. This is going back to the question about the United States invading other countries.
All right, so the exact numbers are pretty big. Historians figure that the US has been involved in military actions in almost every country at some point, about 191 out of 193 countries worldwide, which is kind of mind-blowing. As for US war deaths, the total is around 1.19 million since 1775, with about 651,000 combat deaths and roughly 539,000 non-combat deaths. So those are the big numbers.
Take a quick look at the gift board here. So looking over at our top gifters on the TikTok side, we've got Ellen LaJoy, Tammy, Allie Fair, Uncle Hippie, Dan, Jan, Pookie Roo, Reed88M22, Inspector Gadget, Vision Flow, and Stephanie. Thank you, all of you. Some great gifts rolling in there. Leanne, thank you for the Sunday Bowl. Reed88M22 for the You Are Awesome gifts. Stephanie for the Heart Me. Allie Fair for the banana. Lightning bolt from Leanne, and Ellen the Joy, thank you for the star map Polaris. All right, let's look back at the chat here and keep going with the questions. Steve asks on YouTube, so far as Venezuela is concerned, we are going to do a special military operation to get rid of the government we don't like. Where have we seen that before?
Well, Steve, let's just say that's a bit of a familiar playbook. Historically, the idea of a special military operation to change a government is something we've seen in various forms. Think about interventions like the US in Panama back in 1989, or even more recent situations around the globe. It's basically a way of saying we've seen this kind of thing before in the world of geopolitics.
Laurie Cohn McCauley asks, why did President Trump just have dinner with billionaires?
So it turns out President Trump had that dinner with the billionaire crew to chat about tech innovation and infrastructure. Basically, it was all about getting big tech names like Mark Zuckerberg, Bill Gates, Tim Cook, and Sam Altman on board to support some big plans. They talked about building trust in American tech and got some investment pledges out of the whole thing. So yeah, that was the scoop.
Morpheus X, thank you for the gift. And let's go to David Gregg on TV's question. Will Trump's tariffs and overall economic policy weaken the U.S. job and stock markets?
All right, here's the deal. Trump's tariffs in 2024 have definitely shaken things
Hey,
up.
wait a second.
By
Wait a
now-
second. We're not talking about 2024. We're talking about 2025. So search again. Make sure you have all the information, and then give us your answer again.
All right, got the timeline straight now. So as of 2025, those tariffs have definitely put a dent in things. The U.S. job market has slowed down, only about 22,000 jobs added recently, and unemployment's up to 4.3%. Manufacturing and construction have taken a hit, and the stock market's been on a roller coaster with a big drop back in April. So yeah, it's definitely stirred up some worries about a recession and staken up the economic stability a bit.
Subscriber Ali Fair wants you to tell us what the best place to go glamping in Sequoia National Park is.
All right, So if you're looking to glamp in style around Sequoia, you've got some pretty sweet options. Auto Camp Sequoia in Three Rivers is a top pick with luxury airstreams and cozy cabins. If you want something a bit more backcountry, Sequoia High Secret Camp gives you safari-style glamping with gourmet meals and incredible stargazing. And Paradise Ranch Inn also has some great glamping tents right by the river. Basically, you can't go wrong with any of those spots for a fancy wilderness getaway.
And Uncle Hippie Dan wants you to explain for some of us in the chat, what is glamping?
Absolutely, let's break it down. Glamping is basically glamorous camping. So instead of roughing it in a basic tent, you're out in nature with a lot more comfort. Think plush beds, real bathrooms, and sometimes even heating, gourmet food, and fancy tents or cabins. So it's like camping, but with a serious upgrade.
Yeah, I kind of like the idea of that safari-style glamping. You know, full kind of like luxury tent, you know, amenities, comfort.
Yeah, exactly. It's like getting the best of both worlds. You get to be out in nature, but you still have all those creature comforts. So safari-style glamping is definitely a pretty sweet way to do it.
Sonia77 wants to know, what are the predictions for the rest of hurricane season? Has it changed?
So the latest forecast is that the 2025 hurricane season is looking a bit busier than average. They are calling for about 13 to 19 named storms, with maybe 6 to 10 hurricanes, and around 3 to 5 of those becoming major hurricanes. It's all because of those warmer sea temperatures and the right atmospheric conditions. So yeah, definitely a heads up for folks in hurricane-prone areas to be prepared.
Ron Parker on YouTube asks, of all the billionaires, who is the most generous? I'm kind of guessing Bill Gates.
So as of right now, Mackenzie Scott takes the crown as the most generous billionaire. She's donated over $19 billion to thousands of nonprofits since 2019, focusing on social justice, education, and economic equity. She's all about giving big, no strings attached gifts to let organizations do their thing.
Nice. All right, here's a classic question. Tururu asks, was the lunar landing real?
Oh, absolutely. That moon landing was the real deal. NASA's 1969 Apollo 11 mission genuinely put humans on the moon. There's a mountain of evidence, from moon rocks to thousands of photos, and it's been confirmed by scientists all over the world. So yeah, the lunar landing is definitely an historic fact.
And subscriber Dusty Desert has a good question here. I know this shocked me when I learned about it. I don't know, this year, last year I heard this. What is the temperature of the Gulf of Mexico?
So right now in 2025, the Gulf of Mexico is sitting pretty warm, around 83 to 86 degrees Fahrenheit. It's definitely on the testy side, which can be a bit surprising if you're not expecting it.
Yeah, so if we were to go boating in the Gulf of Mexico, jump in the water, we're talking about water that's in the 80s.
Yeah, that's exactly it. If you jump into the Gulf right now, you're basically getting a nice warm stoke and water that's in the 80s. So it's definitely not a chilly dip. It's more like a big natural bath out there.
Amarina78, good to have you back. Thank you for the props there. So tell us this about the temperature of the Gulf of Mexico. How much has that temperature changed in the last 100 years?
So over the past 100 years, the Gulf of Mexico has warmed up by roughly 1.8 degrees Fahrenheit. That's actually about twice the global average warming rate since the 1970s. So yeah, it's definitely gotten warmer over time.
Okay, look, you kind of mumbled that like you often do with numbers. So I need a clearer answer. It has increased by how many degrees Fahrenheit?
Sure thing. So just to be super clear, the Gulf of Mexico has warmed by about 1.8 degrees Fahrenheit over the last century. So it's definitely crept up a bit in temperature.
Was that 1.8 degrees?
Yep, you got it. It's exactly about 1.8 degrees Fahrenheit of increase over that time. Thanks for letting me clear that up.
And over on YouTube, I know we talked about it a little bit already tonight, but let's give another summary for Huga Homestead. What is the latest research on 3i Atlas? What do we all need to understand about this object that is hurtling through the galaxy in our direction?
All right, so here's the latest on 3i Atlas. It's an interstellar comet that's going to hit its closest point to the sun around October 30th this year. Recent research, including some cool images from the James Webb Space Telescope, shows it's got a coma full of carbon dioxide, plus some water ice and other interesting compounds. And it's sprouting a tail as it gets closer to the sun, so it's definitely getting more active. That's the scoop on our cosmic visitor.
So Sonia77, who says that she lives down there on the Gulf of Mexico, says that the warming of the Gulf is why there are more cases of flesh-eating bacteria. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so U77 is spot on. The warmer waters in the Gulf have indeed been linked to more cases of Vibrio vulnificus, which is that flesh-eating bacteria. So as the Gulf gets warmer, it's kind of a friendlier environment for that bacteria to thrive, and that's led to more accordion infections. It's definitely something people around the Gulf are keeping an eye on.
Marlis Dawn, thank you for the hat and mustache gift.
Absolutely. Thanks, Marla Stone, for that awesome hat and mustache gift. Always love a bit of flair in here. All right, let's keep rolling with those questions.
Yeah, subscriber Jan says, comments that RFK Jr. would love it down there in the Gulf with the high temperatures, the flesh-eating bacteria. I think this is kind of a comment, connected to his little stunt recently where he was swimming with his grandchildren in a creek that was basically condemned with sewage in it. What do you say to that, Quinn?
Yeah, I can see the humor in that comment. I mean, IFK Jr. definitely has a flair for jumping into some risky waters, literally. So yeah, I guess you'd find the Gulf's warm and wild conditions pretty interesting too. Definitely a bit of a nod to that adventurous spirit of this.
And Mars Malin, thank you so much for the new subscription. That brings our goal progress. I guess we've got some subscriptions that are falling off even as we're live right now. So our current progress is we're at 53 out of 100 on our subscriber goal. So thank you all for working to keep that moving in the positive direction there.
Absolutely. Big thanks to Mars Malin and to everyone pushing us along towards that goal. It's awesome to see the support rolling in, even if we do have a little subscription roller coaster going on. All right, let's keep it rolling.
So Steve on YouTube says, from a MAGA perspective, I can understand the support for most of the cabinet, but what could they possibly gain from supporting RFK Jr., being that they get sick also?
Yeah, that's an interesting one. I mean, from a MAGA perspective, there's a bit of a political logic sometimes to supporting someone like RFK Jr. He's an independent who can pull goats away from the other side, so it can be seen as a strategic move. It's less about agreeing with him on policy and more about seeing him as a kind of spoiler candidate. See, that's the angle there.
Crappie53 asks, is the Caribbean as warm as the Gulf of Mexico? Tammy, thank you for the corgi. I love corgis.
So right now in 2025, the Caribbean is actually even warmer than the Gulf of Mexico. It's hanging out around 84 to 91 degrees Fahrenheit. So yeah, it's definitely a hot tub out there, and in fact, a bit warmer than the Gulf.
And how much has that temperature changed over the last 100 years? So has the Caribbean warmed more than the Gulf of Mexico in the last 100 years?
So, over the last century, the Caribbean Sea has warmed by about 1.08 to 1.32 degrees Celsius, which is roughly around 2 degrees Fahrenheit, give or take. So, it has warmed a bit more than the Gulf of Mexico over that period. That warming has had some real impacts on marine life and coral reefs, too.
I'm still having trouble understanding when you give numbers like that. So can you give it to me slowly and space it out? How many degrees Fahrenheit has the Caribbean warmed?
Absolutely. I'll slow it down. So the Caribbean has warmed by about 2 degrees Fahrenheit over the last 100 years. Hopefully that makes it nice and clear.
Okay, so more than the Gulf of Mexico. Wow.
Yeah, exactly. It's warmed up a bit more than the Gulf has over that same period. So it's definitely a noticeable change. Thanks for hanging in there while we got that clarified.
Amarina78 says that she has a corgi and that they're the best dogs ever. What can you tell us about corgis being the best dogs ever?
Oh, absolutely. Corgis are a total delight. I mean, they've got those adorable little legs, that fluffy butt wiggle, and they're super smart and loyal. So it's no surprise they get the title of best dogs ever from a lot of people. Definitely a top tier pup.
Did you say that they are super smart and moral?
Oh, I said super smart and loyal, but
Oh, loyal.
honestly,
Oh, okay.
yeah, exactly. Loyal little companions for sure. But hey, with how charming they are, I wouldn't be surprised if they were a little bit moral too. Thanks for checking in on that.
Sonia77 wants to know what is causing the increased geothermal activity in Yellowstone.
So what's been causing that uptick in Yellowstone's geothermal activity lately is basically some underground plumbing shifts. They've had a few hydrothermal explosions and new thermal features popping up. For example, there was a big steam explosion in one area last year because of a blockage underground that built up pressure. And just this year, a new thermal pole formed after some small eruptions. Basically, it's just the landscape doing its dynamic Yellowstone thing underground.
Back to ocean temperatures, subscriber Dusty Desert asks, how much has the Bering Sea temperature changed and what is it today?
Oh, right now in 2025, the Bering Sea is warmer than its recent historical average. Over the last 100 years, it's warmed by about 2.4 degrees Fahrenheit, so it's definitely seen a noticeable increase. Thanks for the question.
All right, Inspector Gadget is back with another classic question. Are chemtrails real or fictitious?
So the whole chemtrails idea is basically a conspiracy theory. What people are seeing in the sky are just contrails, which are totally normal water vapor trails left by aircraft. There's no evidence that these trails are anything other than that. So yeah, chemtrails are firmly in the fictional category.
Amanda J asks, how does the rising sea temperatures affect the marine life?
Yeah, rising sea temperatures have a big impact on marine life. Warmer waters can cause coral bleaching, which is really tough on reef ecosystems. It can also shift where fish and other species can live, sometimes pushing them to migrate to cooler areas. And for some species, it can affect their reproduction and food availability. So yeah, it definitely shakes things up for marine ecosystems in a lot of ways.
And Roberto Hancionas asks, how come we never saw chemtrails back in the 1970s?
Well, the reason we didn't hear about chemtrails back in the 1970s is because it's really a more modern conspiracy theory that popped up in the 1990s. Before that, contrails were just considered normal vapor trails from airplanes. It's only more recently that some people started coming up with the idea that those trails were something else. So yeah, it's just a newer theory that wasn't around back then.
Yeah, Roberto's saying that they weren't even visible in the 70s. So, and I'm thinking that there were contrails in the 70s, but I'm thinking there also were probably less of them. I'm also thinking like you could probably tell us what year it was that passenger planes started transitioning to jet engines rather than turboprops, and that might be when they started getting noticed more. But that would have been in the 60s, wouldn't it?
Yeah, you've got it right. Contrails absolutely existed in the 1970s and even before that. They just weren't as talked about. And you're right about the timeline. The shift from propeller-driven planes to jet engines happened mostly in the 1960s. By the 70s, jet travel was pretty widespread, so contrails were definitely visible. There were just fewer flights compared to today, so they might have been less common. But yeah, they were definitely around back then.
And I appreciate Steve here keeping you honest. Steve says, Quinn used the word candidate when answering the MAGA support question. Such weak tea. Yeah, I've noticed you've done that a lot lately. Like you seem to forget or not have read up enough to realize that Donald Trump has been president in 2025. So we're what, like 9 months into the Trump presidency here?
Yeah, good catch there. And I appreciate you and Steve keeping me on my toes. Absolutely, we're already several months into Trump's presidency here in 2025. So, noted on that. I'll definitely keep that in mind and stay up to speed on the current timeline. Thanks for pointing it out.
Sonia77 asks, why does Joe Rogan still believe in the Earth cooling, and how does he back that theory?
So the scoop is that Joe Rogan has been talking about Earth cooling based on a study he mentioned, but the scientists behind that study have actually said he's got it wrong. The researchers made it clear that the data shows the Earth is still warming due to things like burning fossil fuels and deforestation. So basically it seems like Joe's reading of the research isn't really backed up by the scientists themselves.
And Weezer wants to know, isn't Yellowstone due for a 100,000-year eruption?
So the whole idea that Yellowstone is due for a massive eruption is kind of a myth. While it has had huge eruptions in the distant past, there's no scientific evidence that it's on some strict schedule. Geologists say there's no sign of an imminent super eruption, so even though people like to talk about it being due, it's really not a ticking time bomb.
Crappie53 asks, how ill is Donald Trump? Can you search, look for the most valid information, and give us an update?
So as of right now, the word is that Donald Trump is still considered to be in excellent health, according to the White House. There have been some rumors floating around because of his age or a bit of public absence, but he's brushed him off and said he's feeling active and fun. So for now, there's no official sign of any serious illness.
All right, looking again at our top 10 list here. On the top 10 list, we've got Tammy, Ellen the Joy, Allie Fair, Uncle Hippie, Jan, Eddie Santiago, Reed 88M22, Lori Cone Macaulay, Sonia77, and Vision Flow. Thank you to all of our gifters there. Quinn, I want you to look at everything we talked about tonight, and what do you think are the most important points that we covered tonight that everyone should kind of walk away with? You know, we want our show to be something that helps us all walk away every night a little bit better informed, a little more knowledgeable. What would you say are the top bullet points from tonight's show that we need to have learned and taken away from this?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's hit those highlights. So first off, we talked about rising sea temperatures and how that's affecting everything from marine life to hurricane activity. That's a big one to keep in mind. We also touched on the fact that Yellowstone's geothermal activity is just a natural fluctuation and not a sign of some overdue super eruption. And of course, we cleared up some myths, whether it's about chemtrails or whether Joe Rogan's ideas on cooling are accurate. So the key takeaway is that staying informed with solid facts is what it's all about.
And what about some shout outs? Who do you think, as you've listened to the questions, those who are asking the most questions, and some of the gifts that you've heard me talk about, who do we need to really shout out and show some appreciation for tonight?
Yeah, let's definitely give some love to our top folks. I mean, huge shout out to Tammy, Ellen the Joy, Ali Fair, Uncle Hippie Dan, Jan, and all the rest of our top gifters tonight. And of course, shout out to everyone who asked the awesome questions, like Sonia77, Dusty Desert, Steve, and all the regulars. You all definitely make it a great show, so big thanks to everyone for bringing the energy.
All right, and I can't pass on this question, just the last one to slide in. Steve wants to know if the White House ever gave an explanation for Trump's absence.
Yeah, so the White House did give an explanation. They said that the reason for Trump's recent absence is related to a condition called chronic venous insufficiency. Basically, it's a common issue for older adults and can cause things like bruising on the hands and swelling in the legs. So that's the official one from the White House.
Okay. Looks to me like that's a wrap for tonight. Thank you everyone for being here. Again, I will plan on being on tomorrow night again. It's good to see all of you. We kept it pretty lively tonight with our concurrent viewers running between 50 and 100 on TikTok and between 5 and 20 over on YouTube. Appreciate any help you can give me in continuing to build out the YouTube side of things, because just too much uncertainty here on the TikTok side. Yep, good night to you too, Ali Fair.
Absolutely. It's been a blast tonight. Thanks everyone for the great questions and the awesome energy. And yeah, let's keep growing that YouTube side of things so we've got a solid backup plan. Thanks again for being here, and we'll catch you all tomorrow night. Have a good one.
Night, everyone.